the skin as an organ and its functions as an organ. We've looked at its individual parts, we've way down deep inside into individual cells. Now let's look at the function of the skin as an organ. And first and foremost, the skin is a barrier. It's a barrier between the inside of us and the outside world. Along with that barrier function come some of the things you would expect a barrier to do, and some things that you might not recognize at first as barrier functions. Its main functions include protection, body temperature regulation, cutaneous sensations, metabolic functions, limited metabolic function. It serves as a blood reservoir, and it gets rid of waste, a limited amount of waste again. As far as protection goes, the skin is, as our first line of defense to getting things into us, is exposed constantly to microorganisms. We bump up against things and get abrasions. We are exposed to temperature extremes, and we are also exposed to chemicals at the level of our skin. So there are three barriers: chemical barrier, physical barrier, and biological barrier. These are not things that the skin is a barrier against necessarily. It is a chemically based barrier, a physically based barrier, and a biological based barrier. So there are chemicals, structures, and cells that serve this barrier function. As a chemical barrier, the skin makes a lot of chemicals, and those chemicals protect us against numerous things. The skin secretes many chemicals like sweat, and sweat contains antimicrobial proteins. The skin produces sebum and other defensins, which kill bacteria. Cells in the skin also secrete the antimicrobial protein defensin. And the skin itself has a low pH, and bacteria in general do not like to grow in acidic environments, so that helps cut down on the growth of bacteria on our skin. And this function is referred to as the acid mantle of the skin. And melanin is another chemical. It's an intracellular chemical, but that provides a barrier against ultraviolet radiation. So chemicals make up part of that barrier. Physically, those flat, dead, keratinized cells found in the stratum corneum, surrounded by glycolipids, are block water and most water-soluble substances from getting into the body through the skin. There are chemicals that are not water-soluble, that are more lipid-soluble, that have the ability to get across this physical barrier. So lipid-soluble substances in general can cross the skin barrier. That would include plant oleoresins, and examples of those would be poison ivy, poison oak. They can get past the skin and induce an immune response in us. Organic solvents like acetone and paint thinner are lipid soluble, and they can generally get past the skin barrier. The salts of heavy metals like lead and mercury can do it. There are some drugs like nitroglycerin that can diffuse across the skin because they are lipid soluble. And then we make other agents that help drugs get across the skin. So if you wear a patch, or you know someone who wears a patch, something like nicotine, there are agents in that patch that are lipid soluble, and they can carry those drugs across the skin. As a biological barrier, there are numerous cells involved in protecting us from the outside world. Within the epidermis, we have phagocytic cells, which include the dendritic cells. They engulf foreign invaders, present them to white blood cells, and turn on the immune response. In the dermis, we have macrophages, which are very similar to dendritic cells. They're doing the same kinds of things, snatching up foreign invaders and presenting them to white blood cells. And however, if organic solvents or heavy metals get through the skin, they can get into the blood, and that can lead to organ systems or multiple organ systems being affected and that can be lethal. So it's possible for some of these organics to get through our skin and really poison us from skin exposure. Kidneys can shut down in some cases. Brain damage can occur. Lead is going to target growing blood cells, so anemia is a problem, and also it will lead to neurological problems. So when you are handling organic solvents or heavy metals, it's very important that you wear appropriate personal protective equipment, the right kinds of gloves to prevent these organic solvents from getting to your skin, because your skin will not be a barrier to them. Another important function of the skin is to maintain body temperature. Under our normal resting body temperatures, sweat glands produce about half a liter of unnoticeable sweat every day, and we call that insensible perspiration. If you expose the body to higher temperatures, dilation of the dermal vessels will cause more blood to come to the skin. That will increase the activity of the sweat glands, and they can produce up to 12 liters, almost 3 gallons, of noticeable sweat, which we would call sensible perspiration. And that perspiration is designed to cool the body. As that water evaporates, it absorbs heat from the body and cools your body down. On the other side of the coin, if you are in a cold external environment, those same dermal blood vessels will constrict, the temperature will drop, skin temperature will drop, and that will slow the process of passive heat loss. The skin is full of nerves, nerve-like cells. It is cutaneous sensory receptors, part of the nervous system, are found throughout the skin. There are exteroreceptors that respond to stimuli from outside the body, things like temperature and touch. Others are called free nerve endings, and they are very important for sensing painful stimuli. So here's our skin. Remember, there's the epidermis, which in most cases has 4 layers. In thick skin, it has 5. The dermis, below that, the papillary layer, the reticular layer, and below that, the subcutaneous layer. And the barrier functions are to keep things from going from this side of the skin to this side of the skin. And they can be chemically based, physically based, or cellular, biologically based. Some of the metabolic functions that skin carries out, it can synthesize vitamin D, which is needed for calcium absorption in the intestines. There are chemicals produced by keratinocytes that can affect carcinogens, enzymes that help break down carcinogens. Keratinocytes activate hormones. They can convert cortisone to hydrocortisone. The skin makes an enzyme called collagenase, which is an aid in the turnover of collagen, helps prevent wrinkles. The skin also is a blood reservoir. Up to 5% of your body's total blood volume may be in your skin at any time. And in addition to that, the skin vessels have the ability to be constricted so that that blood can be shunted to other organs. And that's the kind of thing that happens when you are exercising. You send the blood that's hanging out in your skin to muscles that are going to need it. There's a limited amount of nitrogenous waste, and nitrogenous waste comes from the breakdown of proteins. Proteins have nitrogen in them, and these things are ammonia, urea, and uric acid. Sweat also contains water, and water contains salts in our bodies, so sweating can cause salt and water loss as well. We'll stop there, and next time we'll finish up with homeostatic imbalances of the skin, major homeostatic imbalances of the skin.